Hey, you know who it is. Jesus Cruz of Olympian Multimedia, and we are presenting you with another segment of A Word with the World. And as you can see, we are in our virtual studio today, and we got a special guest. Just a quick backstory to this guest. I got the privilege of meeting her recently at a book event, a Woodbridge book event. Shout out to Jay Logan, author Jay Logan, for putting the event together in the city of Woodbridge for their hospitality. Uh, our guest today was one of the first people to come to my table. We had a great conversation, had immediate connection, I felt at the time, just discussing different things about our artistry and our businesses as well. She's also the proud author of two fabulous books. This one, as you can see on the screen, is called Brooks Promise. And we have the other one called In Good Conscience that we're going to be discussing today. She definitely gained a fan over here because I enjoyed the books very much. So please welcome Miss Janice Berliner. How are we doing today, Janice?
Very well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate
No,
having a fan. Maybe now I have 12.
yeah. And hopefully, after having discussing your books today, people will be lining up to get your books and to show support in that well. It's definitely worthy of the attention that we're giving it to today, the spotlight that we're giving it, because they're two very greatly written books and
Thank
very
you.
unique. So I don't want to get too much into it because we're going to get to, get to talking about it. But I'm ecstatic that you were able to take the time out to be on the show today.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Awesome. So, as you know, Janice, writing is such a unique medium, right? It allows individuals to create these lush, elaborate worlds of interest. We get to share our personal experiences through the confines of storytelling, utilizing different settings, different perspectives, and then, expressing ourselves in a very vivid and innovative way. So, what is it about writing that interests you? Would you classify writing as a therapeutic way for someone to better understand themselves and an environment that they're in?
I'm sure for some people it is, uh, especially if you're writing a self help book, I suppose, about something that you discovered about yourself or about the world that you would like to have others understand as well. For me, it wasn't really about that. I love to read and I love a good story. And I like to make people think and not
Mm-hmm.
just think about the world, but think about themselves. And I like to dig deep into topics that interest me. And as I had mentioned to you when we met, I'm a genetic counselor by training and by profession. And for the last almost 7 years, I've been directing a master's level genetic counseling training program. So I went out of the clinical world and into the academic world. And, they say write about what you know. And it's not like I, had my whole life been thinking someday I want to be an author and one day I'll have time to write. It wasn't like that at all. I had always liked writing and I particularly love editing. And I think I'm very good at editing, but I never thought about it as a career path or even really as an avocation. And one day, literally out of the blue, I was on a beach with my husband on vacation, reading a book, and there was something about the story and the detailed research that went into writing that story. We got up to take a walk on the beach, and like without even thinking about it, the words tumbled out of my mouth. I think I want to write a book. And
Mm-hmm.
and I thought my husband was going to say, sure, in all your spare time, write a book. Why not? But he didn't. He said, so write a book. And for the next hour that we were walking on the beach, we started brainstorming ideas. And that's where Brooks Promise came from. It literally was a spur of the moment thing. But once I started, I couldn't stop. I absolutely love to write. I find the character creation really interesting. There's nothing I hate more than watching a TV show where every character sounds the same, because people
Mm-hmm.
aren't that. So I really like to be able to develop characters that have individual personality traits where there's conflict between them and then there's reconciliation among the people in the story, and that you learn something about people and what they've gone through. And I brought up the genetics aspect of it before because so far the books that I've written, the two you mentioned and the one that I'm working on now, all have to do with families with a genetic disorder or potentially more than one. Um, I'm thinking for book 4, I may branch off of that and maybe do something a little bit different, not pigeonhole myself too much. But I think that stop me anytime. I could go on about this for an hour.
No, keep it going because I feel exactly how you feel. I think talking to numerous people on my end that they ask me why I get into writing books as well, and I guess they are expecting a very overly complicated answer on my journey on why I wanted to become an author, and it really isn't complex. There's no complexity to it. It's something simple as you just gain some type of inspiration regarding
Right.
if you're working on this or just being in a certain type of environment, being around certain type of people. It seems like the simplest thing that kind of makes you want to go towards your passion and kind of makes you think like, I don't know, I think I could take a crack at this and not be too bad at it.
I
I'm
agree.
with you there. I have a natural love for writing. So that obviously helps going into it like, hey, I want to write and express myself in that way, come up with different stories, and definitely get it published, for other people to check out and
Yeah.
appreciate.
What I like to, because, well, it's sort of a double-edged sword, I guess. I I've self-published.
Mm-hmm.
So while it's much harder from the standpoint of marketing and promotion and all, but it's much easier in the sense that without an actual, publishing house, you don't have deadlines, right? So you write when
Yeah.
you want to write, and it continues to be a joy to do. And,
Mm-hmm.
for years, my family would say to me, "Why are you working? It's Saturday." It's, you don't understand. This is not work to me. This is something I
Mm-hmm.
love to do. Some people play golf. I write. Right. And if it's a beautiful day, I will take my laptop out on my deck and write outside. I'm not like, in a little corner in the dark somewhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I, because I don't have deadlines, I don't have to come up with a story. I will write a story when I'm inspired to, when there's an issue or a subject matter I feel passionate about, then it makes it easy to write. And the characters tell you where they want you to go. So I start with an outline, and sometimes I kind of deviate from the outline and like, shoot, now where do I go? But like characters were just not staying within that outline. So, what are you going to do? You kind of have to chase after them and corral them back a little bit. And that's really the fun part, I think.
Very good point. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about writing is not work.
No.
So for you out there, for you viewers out there that are aspiring to, put together your first manuscript, as it were, and put yourself out there as a published author. Please don't let nobody get into your head to kind of making you feel like this is actual work. If you got such a love for something, then it's going to come natural to you. It's not going to feel like work. Trust me, we all know what work actually feels like versus doing something that you love doing. It's a big difference. So definitely when it comes to writing for me as well, I'm with you there. There's nothing like getting a fresh notebook
Yeah.
and a pen. I'm looking through the notebook. It's new, it's fresh. I can smell the freshness coming off of there. I can see the words, visualize the words already on the paper. Um, that's like the best feeling in the world for me.
Yeah.
So
You're old school. I do everything on my laptop. But
yeah, I'm
whatever.
definitely old school. I
Same thing.
mean, sometimes I jot I'll type some stuff up on my phone or on my tablet or the computer, but yeah, I'm definitely old school. It's something different about me just actually writing it down and penning it down and put my stories together that way. So,
Yeah,
everybody has their own way, but as long as you're doing it, that's what's important, right?
that's right.
So I noticed in your two books, Janice, that you made a lot of or made numerous medical references regarding different medical conditions, types of surgeries, medication. You even highlighted illnesses that can affect people personally and the world around them, and even in the confines of the family. Were you using these stories as a way to bring awareness to certain issues? And if so, how?
Very much so. So, like I said, I'm a genetic counselor, which means, it means a lot of things. Ask somebody for an elevator pitch on what a genetic counselor is, and you need at least 100-story building to do that elevator pitch. But the training that we have as genetic counselors, in a nutshell, is to translate complicated medical information into terms that the average person can understand, even without any kind of biology background. So, if you have a personal and or family history of cancer and you're concerned that there might be something hereditary about it, or if you are pregnant and your family history is suggestive of something, or you were exposed to something during your pregnancy, or you have certain screening that doesn't look quite right, or whatever, the genetic counselor is the one who will help explain to you what might this mean, what testing is available to try to figure out what might be going on, and then what would you do with the information once you had it. Some of us see children in a pediatrics center where, maybe this child has some kind of developmental delay or physical anomalies. There could be a lot of different things. And maybe they've been to 12 different medical centers and nobody has been able to figure out what's going on. So that's where genetics comes into play. Not all genetic counselors see patients in clinic, but for the sake of our discussion, that we can limit it to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what our training is and our experience is translating, like I said, that very complicated medical information into terms most people can understand. And I think that there are a lot of misconceptions in the general public about genetics. Some people think genetic conditions are very rare. They're not. Some individually are very rare, but collectively they're not. Some people think that if something is hereditary, that everybody in the family is going to have it, and that's not how it works either. And so I wanted to be able to bring genetics into more of the mainstream. So I don't know how many of your viewers are familiar with an author named Lisa Genova, or Geneva. I never know how to say her name. She is one of my very favorite authors. She wrote Still Alice and a bunch of other books. She is a Harvard trained neuroscientist. She's brilliant, but she writes fiction. She writes fiction about neurologic conditions. And she does it in such a beautiful way that you're reading a story about a person who has a neurologic condition, either from birth or because of an accident or whatever it might be. And you're learning, you don't even know you're learning. You're reading a story about a family that is very compelling, very interesting. You love the characters. You're very sad when the book ends, right? You want to know everything that's happening with this person. Like Still Alice, for most people, I think, are familiar with that one. That has to do with a woman who, very brilliant Harvard linguist, I think, who has a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. And the whole story has to do with, what does she go through? What does her family go through? She actually has genetic testing, and then her adult children are grappling with, do I have this testing too? Do I want to know? And so Lisa Genova, is one of my biggest inspirations for writing, because I wanted to do for genetic disorders what she has done for neurologic disorders.
Wow.
So that's my goal. I do not have the audience that Lisa Genova has. One day, it would be wonderful if I did.
Mm-hmm.
And Jodi Picoult, I think it's actually Pico, I always say her name wrong, has written a number of books like this too. Probably her most famous book, because it was made into a movie, is My Sister's Keeper, which has to do with a whole medical situation and how all the characters in the family are so affected by it in many, many different ways. And the two of them, Jodi and Lisa, are the people I aspire to be. And I'm hoping I kind of fit into that genre. So for your audience who likes either of those kinds of books, I think you'll like mine as well.
Awesome. I know I appreciated it because I love the fact that you were able to add like a educational element, an enlightenment element into your books. Because I know for myself, I didn't know that there were so many different diseases and syndromes that could stem from our genes
Yeah.
and then in turn could become hereditary. So that piqued
Well,
my
they're kind of already
curiosity as well.
hereditary. That's I mean, that's how
Okay.
they to begin with, is because they're already hereditary, right?
Right.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there are
No.
many conditions that are inherited in a recessive way, which means the only way you can end up with this condition is if both of your parents carried it. They're not affected by it, but they carry it and they gave it to you. And so what will happen, I mean, not infrequently, is somebody will say, I don't know how this happened to me. Nobody in the family has this condition. I say, no, I wouldn't expect them to, because the only time somebody has this condition if it's inherited from two unaffected carrier parents. And a lot of recessive conditions are very rare. So it's only when two carriers of the same condition happen to have a child together and both pass it on in the same pregnancy, because you don't pass on all of your genes, you pass on half of them, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, I once saw a family that had 9 children, and their ninth had Tay Sachs disease, which is a very serious degenerative neurologic condition. Their first 8 were unaffected. And you almost want to say, boy, that defies the odds. They're so lucky. You do not tell a family with a child with Tay Sachs disease they're lucky. There is nothing lucky about that. But of the first 8, I would have expected 2 of them, on average, by statistics, to have been affected, and they weren't. So they didn't pass it on in the first 8 pregnancies. Had they stopped at 8 children, they would never have even known they were both carriers. It's interesting, right?
Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and definitely the fact that you were able to, how can I put it? Um, Sometimes when people are writing from experience, let's say for instance they're writing a story based off their workplace experiences, what they do for their day job, or whatever situation that they're in. Sometimes the transition of articulating themselves properly into the confines of a book. It's a
Mhm.
difference when you're just having a conversation with someone and you're just explaining like what you do, right?
Yeah.
Versus I actually have to dictate this and write this down and make it cohesive enough so people can understand. So the fact that you were able to do that, that definitely astonished me as well, because there's so much complexity, in my opinion, to what you do. So
Mm.
the fact that you were able to write it in a way where like I can understand it, of course, I don't know all the ins and outs personally and have an understanding of it, but at least I could get the gist of it as I'm reading the story.
I'm
So
glad.
I'm very impressed, Janice.
Thank
Cause not I have come across some people that um like I said was trying to make that transition. What they do for a living, there really isn't no complexity to it compared to yours. But
you.
then when they like I said, when they make that transition, it seems like they try to overinflate a little bit what they're doing. And I get
Mm.
it. It's a story in the end. You can make it however you want it to be. But I feel like there has to be a little bit of authenticity to it as well,
Sure.
just to make the story make sense so
Hmm.
that you don't lose the reader as they're going about with your story.
Right.
So I know we're going to start off with In Good Conscience, as I put that up here. And the neat thing about this, to go along with the medical aspect that you put into the book, is that it features so many dynamics of multiple relationships. So for you viewers out there, I don't want to give away too much, but the story doesn't tell different feelings and the interactions and how intense they are between the main characters. You have
Mm.
Aiden and Corey, you have Aiden and his director Jason, Aiden and his mother Jacqueline, which I
Mm.
found probably the most unique out of everyone there,
Mm.
along with his interaction with nurse Fiona. So, how important was it for you to include these human elements into your story? And is any of these scenarios that you've written about come from personal experience?
Hmm. Um, I really like writing about complicated relationships. I don't think there are that many relationships that are not complicated.
Yeah, you're not lying
You
about
know,
that.
right? I mean, there's the relationship that you have with somebody, and then there's the relationship that you sort of want to have with that person that isn't always what you want it to be. Um, so there's some element of, I think that we all, many of us, grow up feeling like, you start out thinking your parents know everything, and then suddenly you think they know nothing. And then somewhere along the line, you figure out they really did know a lot. They didn't know everything, but they're just people. They're just trying to do the best they can under the circumstances. And as, as a parent, I know that whenever anything goes wrong with a relationship that I have with one of my children, or I feel like I did something wrong, it's very overwhelming. It feels like I made a mistake. And as a parent, I didn't have a right to make a mistake. Everything had to be,
Mhm.
exactly right. And now that my kids are adults, they've been very good about telling me that I did the best I could with what I had at the time. And that's been such a gift to me as a parent. And I think there are a lot of parent child relationships that, from one end or the other or both, don't feel like what the people wanted them to be. And I think that's really important to explore. And in both of the books that I've written so far, and certainly in the third one that I'm working on now, there's an element of that, of, I wish you would be like this. Well, I wish you would be like that. And well,
Mhm.
maybe we can meet in the middle, but we're all just people doing the best we can. So, long answer to your question, but relationships are complicated, and each
Mhm.
relationship is and ought to be different. So the relationship that Aiden has with this nurse is very complicated. It starts out with a lot of
Mhm.
anger and resentment, and then they sort of come to understand where the other comes from. And,
Mhm.
people watching this are like, what are they talking about? I don't know the story yet. So
Mhm.
you want to talk about the story without spoilers, or how do you want to do
Well,
that?
I'm glad you brought that up, Janice, because that's a perfect segue to our next thing that I want to discuss, which I found very interesting. I think a lot of viewers will probably resonate with this next piece that we're going to talk about because your story speaks on the topic of workplace ethics
Mhm.
and the importance of protecting an individual's right to privacy. So
Mhm.
that's really a big topic among
Yes.
considering a lot of things that's been going on in the news headlines of late. So Fiona, just to give you a little bit of backdrop for you viewers out there, Fiona dived deep into Aiden's medical files and conducted her own investigation and determined that Aiden might suffer from Lynch syndrome and that his family might be affected. So for Janice, my question to you would be, could there be a gray area, as it were, quote unquote, to forego such a code if it could potentially save someone's life?
There is, and there have been lawsuits along these lines. So the issue is, particularly in genetics, the family is your patient, right? I mean, for most medical conditions, the person sitting in front of you when you are the doctor or the nurse is the patient. What did I just say? The
Mm-hmm.
patient is the issue, right? And so if that
Mm-hmm.
person has diabetes or a high blood pressure or a thyroid condition or whatever it might be, you're treating that. But when it comes to a genetic condition, your patient is really the whole family. And, yes and no, right? From an ethical standpoint, from HIPAA standpoint, that's not the case. It's the patient in front of you. That's the person who has those rights to privacy and can sign off, in a sense, on, do we share this information with family
Mm-hmm.
members? But physicians and other healthcare professionals also have a duty to warn. And there have been
Mm-hmm.
legal cases that have been won by people who have said, you knew that my mother or my sister or my whoever had this condition that I might also have. And had I known about that, I could have taken some preventative strategies and saved myself illness, death, even heartache,
Mm,
expense, um, whatever it might be. And depending upon the ages of people when all of this is figured out, maybe I wouldn't have had children, or maybe I wouldn't have had biological children had I known that I was at risk for this condition.
mm,
So you
good point.
hope that in most families, people want to tell their family members because they want to protect people. They don't want people to go through what they've gone through. But it doesn't always
Mm,
work. And I am was always amazed, in almost 30 years of clinical practice, I took family histories on every patient I saw. That's a lot of family histories. You would be amazed how much estrangement there is. Oh, since my father died, we don't talk to that part of the family. Or when my father died and they read his will, his family no longer talks to us or whatever. Rift all over the place. So
mm,
there are times when people really don't want to share the information, or they don't mind if the information is shared. They just don't want to have to be the one to do it because they don't want to have to talk to
yeah,
us. So that gets
yeah.
complicated. Um,
Mm,
Sometimes it's, well, they never did anything for me. Why should I do anything for them? It sounds petty. It sounds crazy. It happens. There are also people who say, look, I don't mind if people know, I guess, but I'm very private. I don't really want to share what I've been through. And when people are sick or scared, they have a right to that privacy. So it's very complicated. And that's exactly why I wrote this story. And so I'm really glad that you picked up on all of that, because I remember talking to my sister, and she's my beta reader. Maybe she's my alpha reader. I don't know what you call that, but I write a chapter and I send it to her and she reads everything as I
mm,
write it. And so at
mm.
one point I said to her, I think of this as a confidentiality versus a duty to warn story. And she said, really? I kind of thought it was just poor actor dude got cancer. Like, well, it's that
Wow.
too. It's that too. But that's a vehicle, right? To tell
Mm,
this ethical quandary. I find medical ethics fascinating. So the scene that I wrote where Fiona is brought in front of the ethics board in the hospital
mm,
was so uh, engaging. I don't know the word to use. I loved writing that scene, is to try to have her, while in trouble with the ethics board, try to express her anger that nobody has done for this family what she did, even though she didn't have a right to do it. She was not Aiden's nurse. She only looked into his medical records because he's a famous actor and she was curious, which is a huge no-no and should have gotten her fired. But
mm,
in doing it, she discovers, or she thinks she did anyway, that he may have a condition that's going to affect his family members. And her argument to the ethics committee is, why didn't anybody else do this? Like, you can yell at me for an indiscretion, and rightfully so. But why didn't anybody else take care of this family? And that's not okay either. So anyway, that's where I was going with that.
and Janice, also too, what I enjoy is just the realism.
Mm,
As I'm visualizing, as I'm reading this, you remind me a lot of my last guest that I had, who happened to be at the same event. His name is Hugh O. Smith, and I had him on the show as well. And both of you did such an amazing job with your dialogue
mm,
and just bringing that realistic aspect to it. It really felt like I was looking at a movie,
mm.
visualizing a television show, episode. But even further, like I can actually see it happen in real life. I recently went through a similar situation, somewhat similar situation with my father.
Mm.
Um, he had a stroke last
Oh,
year,
I'm
and not
sorry.
to go so deep into it, I don't have a great relationship with my father. You know, um, but I made it a point to go up there and be supportive along with my sister. And it just turned into, for lack of a better word, it turned into a mess
Oh,
with his family and his significant other.
Mm.
and his other children and his other family members, how they wanted to make different medical decisions that me and my sister just didn't feel right and feel comfortable with.
Mm.
And they couldn't understand the fact that being that we're his next of kin, basically, that we had that authority to kind of dictate certain things. And it's not that we didn't want to give them consideration, but it was just like we need to pursue all options possible to save this man. And it's like if this is somebody you care about, I think you will be in the same line of thinking, right? Like we got to do everything that's possible, even if what's presented is experimental and the probability is kind of like 50-50. To me, that's better than nothing at all. Like we have to try. So
As long
that's why I appreciate your book. It's just because the realistic aspect and like me recently being in that kind of experience, having that experience myself.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's very difficult, but I appreciate
Yeah.
what you're saying. And I think that writing it in as realistic a way as possible is what resonates, like you said, with readers. And people are much more likely to engage in the story and really understand the points you're making if they can relate to the
Mm.
characters. Yeah.
Hey, hey, hey. I'm glad you guys tuning back in. We're here on part 2 of this amazing interview for A Word with the World with the great, illustrious author Janice Berliner. And we're at the point of our interview today when we're going to be discussing the next book here, Brooks Promise, A Real Treat. And for you viewers out there, you know how I do. I'll give you a brief overview. I don't want to give you too much because I don't want to ruin it because you need to go out and get the book. But basically, the book entails, or the premise behind it is, again, stays in the confines of a family dealing with various struggles that become detrimental to themselves personally and as a whole within the family unit. So it definitely embellishes further on the family dynamics and how relationships can transform over time due to misunderstandings and lack of compromise. From the turmoil between Julia and Sam due to the lack of communication, to Susie falling out of love with Frank, to the disconnect between Kyra and Ryan on having a baby. Family is definitely a prevalent theme in your novels, Janice. So how important is family to you and to keep the spirit of unity strong when things are troublesome?
Mm. My family is everything to me. I have 3 adult children who are my world. And, a husband I love dearly, and a sister I'm desperately close with, and my mother and my in-laws and uh, cousins that I adore, and it goes on and on. And there's nothing I wouldn't do for any one of them. It means everything. Yeah, my books, you're right, are very centered on family. The third book that I'm writing right now is as well. Um, and it's not all rosy. There are a lot of conflicts, there are arguments, there are differences of fundamental opinions, there are secrets and repressed memories and all sorts of things that can interfere. And in book 3, there's a lot of psychiatric illness. And the issues become, where did it all come from, and why, how do these people interact with each other, and how do the illnesses that they have make it that much more difficult, yet they all have a common root to them in the first place.
Mm.
So yes, family is very important to me and my work. And we were talking before about what genetic counselors do, and if you think about it, that's the whole root of genetic counseling too, is families. And what affects one may affect many in the family. It's one
Mm.
area of medicine where your patient is potentially a whole family and not just the person sitting in front of you. So um, that became a theme in my work as well as my personal life very early on.
Awesome. And again, we touched base with it earlier in the interview of just using the family setting as that backdrop that's easy for a lot of readers to just resonate with. We all have families. And we also been down that road of we have our good moments with them, and
Yeah.
then we have them not so good moments where it's like you want to tear your hair out and, just be not allow yourself to be overcome with frustration, realizing that they're human too. They're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But it's not to say it's coming out of a place of malice.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't happen that way, but for the most part, within the family setting, it's not like family members are meant to hurt them, hurt other family members.
Well,
They don't have that
so
intention within
that
them.
can also happen is the thing.
Yes, it
And
can.
I think that it's really helpful for readers to see themselves and their family members in what they read. And I know there have been times that I've read things and thought, oh, I'm glad it's not just me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there are other families that go this kind of route as well. And sometimes it's nice to be able even to learn a few things from it. Worked for her, maybe it'll work for me. Even if it's fiction, it might. Um, One of the biggest gifts that my children ever gave me, probably the biggest gift, is in saying things like, we know you did the best you could, even though like mistakes are always made by parents, but on balance, things were pretty good with us growing up. And you absolutely did everything you could. Like you never could have known that I was going through X, Y, or Z. And that was a gift to me because I had felt as a parent like I should have seen all of this. I should have helped. I should have protected better. Right. And even though maybe intellectually you know that you can't always be there for every single little thing, you you want to protect your children with everything that you have. And when you feel like you failed that, it's the worst feeling in the world. So them saying to me, listen, you did what you could with the information that you had at the time. And, maybe you do things differently now, but that's okay, was enormous. Felt like I lost 10 pounds.
And two, like I could go along with that as well. Like I know, like sometimes as a parent, you tend to be hard on your kids, and sometimes I guess I could be overbearing myself. But I tell them once I get to the point that I don't care, that's when you got yourself a serious problem. So, like for me being hard on you shows that I care, that I actually taking an interest in your life and what's going on with it, and I want to steer you as best as I can
Yeah.
down the right track, so that you don't backpedal to making the same mistakes like me and your mother did, you know,
Right.
or even like other family members that you see are going through different struggles and whatnot. You know, it's human nature to quickly judge them. Like, yo,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? You should know better than that. You have a conscience. You know what's right and wrong. But I don't feel like any of us is in the position because we can quickly fall down that rabbit hole ourselves.
And we have.
And yeah, and we have. So for anybody to be that pompous enough to be like everything's been perfect in my life, and then you could just go ahead and judge someone else, especially a family member. I mean, they're family. You're gonna want to be more apropos to help them versus anybody else. They're family. They're your blood. So
I think probably one of the worst things you could say to your child is, I'm disappointed in you.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever said that to my children. Thank goodness I never had occasion to. I don't think they've ever disappointed me at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like pleasing your parents is for most kids, even adult kids, one of the most vital pieces of their lives. If you have a decent enough relationship that they care what you think of them.
Yeah,
Um, so
I agree. Good
yeah.
points. And I'm glad, hopefully, for reader or for your viewers out there, decide to go get the books. And for the ones who have had the privilege of getting your books and enjoying them, hopefully they take that in as well. Again, just the realism in it and different aspects and elements that you incorporated in the books. Definitely, I can hone into what you said earlier, like uh, use it like a learning lesson. Like there's
Mhm.
some things that we could take from it that we can apply to ourselves as well, which I think that makes your book unique and it separates yourself from other authors who tend to, no disrespect to them, but sometimes they just sound a little preachy,
Mm,
and it kind of takes away from the realism of everything, because it's kind of like you're getting on your soapbox and you're just kind of trying to attack them a little bit.
mm.
And it's nice to know, or it's nice to read work where it kind of just really speaks to you personally. That's how I took it. Certain elements of your book, I felt like you were actually talking to me
Huh.
personally,
I
if that
love
makes
that.
any
Thank you
sense.
for saying that. Yeah,
So,
I love that. And
uh,
if your viewers are reading my books, please reach out to me. I would love to know what you think and
mm,
how it did resonate with you, or maybe it didn't, and why not? That would be really helpful feedback for my continual growth as a writer. I would love that.
yeah, I say that all the time. I tell people, speak up.
Yeah.
If you got something to say, just go ahead and say it, whether it's good or bad. Either way, um, somebody taking time to read your work and appreciate your art form, even if it's something that may not sit with you well, maybe their critique is a little harsh. Just the fact that they read it and they're that passionate enough to just go ahead and say that to you,
Yeah.
um, to me, that means so much to me personally. I
Agreed.
know for other people, they'll take it as, man, who are you to talk to me like that? Like, you don't know nothing about writing or whatever. I don't really take it like that. I just take it like they took the time out to read the book, and for them
Right.
to be passionate enough to just say anything about it means the world to me.
Well, what I say to my students is I welcome your feedback because we're never going to improve if we don't have that kind of feedback. All I ask is that you do it respectfully.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
don't think it takes that much more effort to say something in a way that respects the person's effort and feelings, even if you're saying, listen, I didn't care for it. It didn't resonate with me. Here's why. Or I think certain parts of it were boring or slow or over the top
Mm.
or whatever. Like that's all fine to say, but not like you're a stupid idiot. Why do you bother writing? I mean, there's just no purpose to that. Not that I could really see anybody doing that, but you never know.
You'd be surprised. I done ran
Yeah,
into a
maybe I
few that were
would.
just like, wow, okay, I need to get up out, get away from this situation.
Yeah, or I might not get out of bed tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. So, Janice, in your book, In Good Conscience, that we spoke about earlier in the interview, you tackled the topic of ethics. In Brooks Promise, you speak on how secrets can tear a family apart internally. So, I am very intrigued on how you're going to answer this question. In your opinion, is keeping a secret a sincere form of protection so someone's feelings don't become compromised? Or is it a form of dishonesty due to the fear of the possible repercussions?
I'm going to say yes. It's both of those things. Right?
Okay.
There's no question it's both of those things. So it's, I think you have to ask yourself, why am I keeping this secret? Right? Am I
Mm,
protecting myself or am I protecting the other person? So if you've done something that you feel you shouldn't have done, you feel guilty about it, ask yourself, if I tell whoever, am I doing that because this person really needs to know, deserves to know, and I will face whatever repercussions come from that? Or am I saying it to clear my conscience? Right? If it's going to hurt
wow.
that person's feelings and I am purely doing it to ease my conscience, that's not a gift to the other person. That's a gift to me. And now I've been selfish twice because first I've kept the secret and then I've made myself feel better at somebody else's expense. So that's
Mm,
in that case, I would say you should probably keep the secret. If the other person doesn't need to know, won't benefit from knowing, it isn't going to help the other person know it, why would you hurt the person's feelings for, in essence, no real reason, or the only reason being to clear your conscience? Does that make sense?
that makes perfect sense. And also,
Mm.
too, to elaborate on what you're saying, I kind of softened my stance a little bit too, because I kind of got the demeanor or mentality that don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. So
Yeah.
I'm very, very bold in that manner. But I've softened my stance over the years because sometimes you do need to take in consideration the mentality and the demeanor of the other person, as far as, if I tell him or her this really could be do more harm than good. This definitely
Right.
could be more detrimental to them, because mentally, psychologically, spiritually, they may not be able to handle it properly.
Right.
And it ends up turning into, the situation could turn more, how can I put it? Like, the situation could turn into a travesty on both
Good.
ends,
Well, and
So,
then there's the potential collateral damage, right?
yeah.
So let's say, take any example, husband cheats on wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he decides he better come clean. She deserves to know. If it was a one time thing and, you're the husband, right? And you say to yourself, I feel so horrible that this happened. It's never going to happen again. And you truly believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you hurt her feelings and potentially pull your whole family apart? Now, maybe your children don't trust you anymore. Now your children feel like they need to take sides. Now there's maybe a separation, right? There's so much fallout from that.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Now, I'm not saying it was right for him to cheat on his wife in the first place. Of course not. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make the situation better to tell her. It only makes it worse. So now it's a compounded problem. If you said to yourself, oh my gosh, look what I risked. Thank goodness she never found out. I'm not going to tell her because I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to hurt my family and the relationship I have with my children and all of those things. So I'm going to make sure that I never put any of us in this situation again. Leave it alone. Now,
Yeah.
if I were the wife, would I feel that way or would I want to know? Thankfully, I've never been in that situation. I don't really know how I would feel, but I kind of think I would feel just like, don't, if it's not going to happen again and I don't have to think about, like, don't tell me, right? Why should I feel that hurt and that betrayed and that conflicted of, do I stay with him and break up and, and keep that secret and whatever, or do I leave him and take my kids, or leave it? Like, it's so much. It's like throwing a bomb into the middle of the house and watching it go off, or saying, maybe I just won't diffuse that bomb in the first place, because how will that help anyone?
Yeah. And then sometimes too, like, telling somebody of a mistake that you made, if you own up to it yourself personally, and for a fact going forward you learned your lesson, and this is not going to become an issue going forward, then I could definitely go along with your line of reasoning. Like, you're just going to do more harm than good, you
Right.
know. But if you see it within yourself that you have a problem, and it's going to escalate to the point where it could
Yeah.
definitely damage the family in some way, shape, or form, you know, that's when I feel like you owe it to yourself. Like, you need to, you know, own up to it, confess to it, and then
Agreed.
allow
And
them,
ask
your
for help.
family, to decide if they want to forgive you or not, or they want to move forward, or maybe they just want to go in a different direction. You know,
Right.
I know for some people it's hard because it's like you're telling the person the secret, or you're owning up to your mistake. They're just like, oh, you're just trying to clear your conscience, you know?
Yeah.
And that goes into that judgmental type of status where it's just like, uh, you're kind of like trying to act as if you have godlike powers and you can read people's hearts and minds. And that definitely becomes like a trickery slope. I definitely try not to do that, because if somebody is willing to admit to their mistakes face to face, and they're it's not just about the emotion that they show, it's just the fact that they're even willing to say it and confront you about it. To me, that speaks volumes, because they literally could have never said nothing at all and just act like everything was normal. So for them to fess up to it, clearly there's an issue at hand. Now you got to make the choice. Do you want to help them? Do you want to stay here? You want to have their back? You want to
Yeah.
move forward with them and see if we can resolve this? Or if you choose to move on, that's perfectly fine as well, you know? But in situations like that, it's, I guess it's human nature that, it's hard for people to not be judgmental and see what their angle is as far as why they do that. But
Yeah.
I think you made some really valid points on that. It's definitely it's like one of them type of topics, you know what I mean? Because it definitely gets people emotional and riled up. Like, I don't know, some people it's like, just tell me, I need to
Right.
know, blah 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 blah. But once you get the information,
Yeah.
look how you're acting. You know what I mean? Like, you're not taking it as good as you claimed you were. You were gonna take it, So
And so much depends upon what that kind of information is. Like if it's, I don't know, maybe you made a terrible financial decision or something and it has ramifications for other people. Well, they may need to know because it may affect how they behave and what they do going forward. Or, in the example, take the example of a genetic disorder, right? If you have something hereditary and you know about it, I mean, we all have something and we may not know about it, but if you know about it, and let's say you don't tell your family members that they may also be at risk for it, right? It's a lot like what we were talking about within good conscience. Um, then they can't do what they might otherwise have done to protect themselves. So keeping a secret like that can actually be really dangerous. Not
yeah,
always. There's certain disorders that you couldn't really do anything about anyway. And maybe you'd be better off not knowing. And some people choose not to know. So when I talk to my students about this kind of thing of telling family members, so I'll give you an example. Let's say you have somebody who finds out that she has a mutation in a gene related to breast cancer. Okay. And that means that her family members may also be at increased risk. It depends if they also have this gene mutation and a bunch of other things.
mm,
But maybe she has a cousin that she had a falling out with a while back, right? They had a fight over a will and a grandparents or who knows what. And she's like, I don't talk to that cousin anymore. But I don't necessarily mind, or I kind of want her to know about it. Like I'm not looking for her to be ill. I just don't want to talk to her. So the
right,
situation for the medical professionals becomes, can I tell her for you? Like, is that okay?
mm,
Right? So
mm,
that you don't have to be the one to contact her, but she will know the information. The patient may say, sure, like that makes a lot of sense. Please do contact her. But now you
mm,
have the situation where that cousin may really not want to know. Some people are like, do not tell me that. I will do the screening I need to do as any average woman would do. I don't want to know if I'm at increased risk. I can't live with that anxiety. So now you, as a medical professional who's never met this cousin, are in a situation of, well, I could tell her, but then I'm violating her right not to know, even in trying to protect her right to know.
mm,
So then what do I do? So maybe I send her a letter that says, your cousin asked me to tell you that she has a medical situation that could possibly in the future also affect you. If you'd like to know anything more about this, please contact me.
mm,
It's something. But these things have to be thought through. Now, that's not an example that most people would have in their lives.
mm,
But I was in a situation way back years and years ago with someone that I knew in my personal life. And it's a long story and I don't want to reveal any,
mm,
confidences. Um, but she basically was like, well, I need to call my sister. I was like, hold on, or my parents. I forget what the situation was, but, I need to call my parents. I'm like, I'm not so sure your parents wanted to know this information because they didn't tell you about it in the first place. She found it
mm,
out from a different family member. So I'm
mm,
like, I'm not saying don't tell them because I know you're very close to them, but just think about how you're going to approach this. Like, don't just knee jerk pick up the phone. Think about how you're going to tell them because they weren't so sure they wanted to have the information in the first place. So it was a whole long thing. And, far be it from me to tell anybody how to behave in their own families when they know the family members and I don't. But
mm.
sometimes people just need a little guidance on how to think that through.
Yeah. And develop the attribute attack. You
Yes.
use a little bit of
How would
tact.
you want to be told that information?
Mhm.
Right? Would you want to be told if you were, walking through a department store and you're shopping and you're like, having a nice day and somebody calls you and says horrible things, right? I had I don't even know if I ended up seeing this patient ever. I just know I got this phone call one day from a very upset, very young person. She was maybe 19 or something. And she came from a family with I forget, her mother had had ovarian cancer or something. I worked in a cancer center. And I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but she said, my doctor did genetic testing for me. And I guess I didn't really fully understand what he was doing. But I was just
Mhm.
driving and my phone rang, and it was the nurse in the doctor's office who just blurted out, "Oh, you tested positive for whatever this thing was." She said, "I nearly crashed my car." And she said, "Had I known that that's what they were testing me for, I never would have been tested because I really didn't want to know that. And now that I know, I can't not know." And my heart went out to her. I mean, the medically minded side of me was like, why did you undergo testing without understanding what that testing was for? Right? That was kind of a dopey
Mhm.
move. Like, I'm assuming she signed an informed consent form. Obviously,
Mhm.
I didn't say that to her. She was hurting. I'm not going to like place blame on her. But how sad. And it's true. Once they tell you that information, you can't not know it anymore. Right? So now you have to deal with it.
Mhm.
So these kinds of things require, yes, tact and patience and a very careful approach. Think about how you would want to be told something like that. Would you want to hear life altering news while you're driving? Seems like a bad idea.
Good point.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And cell
Timing
phones, as
too.
much as I love cell phones, that's been an issue because you never know where you're catching somebody.
Yeah. That's why I'm not a big fan of like especially if it's something important, like to go through the whole like texting, like long paragraphs or
Yeah.
like, you know, doing the phone calls. I mean, given on the depending on your situation, how things roll out, I guess maybe, if somebody needs to know some information real quick, a phone call, a text is quicker. I'm more of like doing it in person.
Mm,
I want to see your reaction. I want to see your emotion. I want to make the experience more personal,
yeah.
because sometimes things can be interpreted wrong through a text
Absolutely.
or a phone call or email or whatever, and you didn't really mean it that way. So I'd
Yes.
rather
Body
just do
language
things in
is
person.
huge.
But you made
Yes.
some really valid points just about the timing, the tag. It's
Mm,
sort of like our mindset, right, Janice, when it goes to like writing our books. It's
mm,
not, we're just going to go ahead and just write down a whole bunch of different thoughts. We're just putting the story together, blah, blah, blah. And then we just go ahead and publish it. And hopefully it works out. We put in a lot of really in depth thought into what we're writing down here because we
right.
want readers to enjoy our work. So
Absolutely.
for you guys out there, it's something like, to think about. You kind of, use that analogy a little bit of like going into your craft and how you're planning things out accordingly. When you're talking and dealing with certain situations, dealing with your family, friends, whoever, you might want to kind of plan out things a little bit first before you go into it. And then prepare yourself for whatever reaction you're going to get, because it may not be the reaction that you think you're going to get or whatever. So great points, Janice. So right now, I would like you to speak to the viewers directly. You know,
Okay.
so what advice would you give for individuals who dream of having their ambitions come to fruition?
Well, don't we all?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the purpose of having dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say don't let anybody stop you.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a dream and you have the means to make it happen, whatever that might be, um, go for it because you never know where you can land if you work really hard at it. There are certain things that I guess our parents and our teachers tell us as we're growing up, you can be anything you want to be. Um, at 5 feet tall, I'm never going to dunk a basketball. It's just not going to happen. I've never tried, actually, in full disclosure,
Mhm.
but I it's not going to happen. But if you want to further your education, if you want to be a writer, if you want to, I don't know, there's a million different things. You can likely do it if you bite off, one bite at a time, chew it slowly, swallow, and take another bite, and not try to do it all at one time and overwhelm yourself. Keep yourself going. Surround yourself with people who believe in you to the extent you're able to do that. And
Okay.
know when you go into it that you're going to stumble along the way. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get up and keep going. Right.
Mhm.
And, if there's something you really truly want to do it, because you may not ever feel fulfilled in your life if you don't. And
Really
if it
good
doesn't work
point.
out and you end up hating it, it might be something you've dreamed of doing your whole life. And then you finally get there and you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. That's okay.
Mhm.
You're not
Mhm.
giving up on yourself or your dreams. You're learning. And
Mhm.
then, maybe out of that comes something else that you really want to do. You meet new people that you never would have met had you not gone down that road. And they're all valuable in some way, positive or negative. They teach you things.
Definitely. And definitely for you guys out there aspiring to be an author, whatever crap that you're trying to get into, it's okay to take baby steps. It's okay to whatever goals that you set out for yourself are not really that monumental. Like you said, you're just taking small bites. You know what I mean? Allowing yourself to chew, allowing yourself to process what's going on, finding your way, finding your identity as far as what you're trying to do in life.
Mhm.
And then as you start getting better at your craft, then you can probably expound a little bit or expand a little bit more and have more in-depth goals, bigger goals for yourself that you're trying to strive for.
Yeah.
But at least you're you created a starting point for yourself. You
Yeah, but
know,
try not to expect too much from yourself too fast.
yeah.
Things that are worth doing take time and patience and a couple steps forward and maybe a step or two back and then a few more forward and a couple more
Mm.
back, as you're learning to do it. And that doesn't mean that you're not slowly making progress.
And work at your pace. Don't try to compare yourself to how you're looking at so and so over here, and it looks like they're reaping the benefits of their work more quicker or a more timely fashion compared to yourself. Work at your pace where it allows you to be comfortable and be productive. You can't base everything what you're doing on just because this person over here is finding some level of success. What they're doing is working for them, so you got to find your own way and manifest your own skill set and how you're going to go about doing things in life.
Mm.
Don't
That's
get into the mentality of comparing yourself to other people. Just because you
right.
see them doing something over here, it doesn't make them any better than what you're doing.
No. And you don't know how other people are doing things either, what struggles they have
Yeah.
or what help they've had on the side. You're absolutely right. I think that's really good
Or
advice.
being a little shady, who
Mhm.
knows? I'm
That's
not
true.
pointing fingers out there, people, but I'm just saying there are people out there that take shortcuts. So
Yeah.
you don't know the whole story as far as like why they have a level of success. Just keep focused at what you're doing. Because if you stay patient and you still be vigilant, keep working at what you're doing, eventually you'll start getting on the right track and moving forward and progressing. Right. So Janice, we're at the tail end of our interview of this remarkable interview. You definitely offer a lot of insight for the viewers. Um, so what is new on the horizon for you?
Mm, okay. Well, a couple of things. One, I'm retiring this spring. So from
Oh
the,
man, I'm so jealous.
well, it took a long time to get here and it wasn't the easiest decision because I love my profession and I love my colleagues. And, the job that I've been doing for the last almost 7 years is one that I had aspired to my entire career. So I was very happy to get here and I have learned so much and I've met wonderful people and I have really loved a lot of things about it. But there's also a lot of other things that I still want to be able to do while I'm young enough and energetic enough and, have the wherewithal to do, like travel
Hmm.
and write. So right now I'm working on my third novel, which is titled,
Yay.
What Never Was Mine. And as I
Okay.
mentioned, this one is about a family with a number of different psychiatric illnesses and the trauma that kind of started all of that. Um,
Okay.
and I've been working on this for so long because I really have so little free time to work on it that once I really get back into it, I think it'll be a lot of fun to do. So I set this one in my hometown where I grew up, because I just felt like doing that. And for a very dear friend of mine who does the cover art for my books, she still lives up in that area, and she was so excited to see this. So it's really it's a labor of love. It's so much fun to do, and I don't know how you feel about it, Zeus. I find writing so easy. I know that sounds cocky and weird, but like if I actually
Yeah.
have time to sit down and write, it just kind of flies out of my fingers. Um,
Mm,
and I'm not going to say I never have a writer's block, but basically, I just need to have the time, and I already
yeah.
have an outline for book 4, so I just want to like get to that.
Well, that sounds great. I can't wait for the next book to come out. And
Thank you.
definitely when the next book come out, we got to have you back on the show so
Love
we
it.
can get all nerdy and talk about it and get in depth with it and see
I
where
can
your
get very
process is with
meditative
that.
study.
Definitely. Like I said, I always say this to people. I love being around like-minded people,
Yeah.
especially in the confines of I notice in like the author community, the writing community, how very supportive they are. Because
Yes.
I'm involved in a lot of other different things as well, music production, photography, videography, and I do network with other people that's within the mediums. But it's something about the writing community. It's just very refreshing, very invigorating. Talking, it's very supportive. They're not. They tend to they're willing to give up their tips, techniques on how, some people are a little reserved when it comes to like their craft or whatever. It's like, I don't want to give away my secrets or whatever. And it's like, look, man, I'm not trying to copy your style here, but I
This
just
is
want to
all
pick your
better.
brain a little bit just to see, what your thought process is going into what you're doing. And some people tend to get, kind of like a ballerina. They're on their tippy toes here and just getting all nervous and whatnot. So it's just nice and refreshing to talk to other authors and just to see the excitement that comes out of them when it comes to like their work. You know what I mean? Like they're just so much into it. And the main thing I hear from everyone is that they can't wait to write. you
Yes.
know it's like there's not enough of time in the day. I got all
Right.
these thoughts going and I want to hurry up and put them down on paper or whatever, start typing it up on the computer, but it's like there's just not enough time. So I love it. I really find it really invigorating, very encouraging and
Mm.
inspiring too, to talk to different authors. And it definitely keeps my creative juices going myself, because
Yeah.
I agree with you. I got writer's block too sometimes, uh but it's pretty much rare. You know, I got so many things going on in my head, and I take inspiration from pretty much anything. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It could just be the most minute thing,
Yeah.
but I'll hurry up and make a note about it. And then here I am. I'm already expanding it all already, and I already got a few paragraphs going toward it. So,
I find I'm far
yeah.
more creative asleep than I am awake. So I wake up and, I've had dreams that were just detailed and strange and really I have no idea where they came from. Sometimes I write them down and think I could probably make something out of this at some point. Then I come back to it a
Yeah.
year later and go, what? I don't even understand what I wrote. And I
Yeah.
don't remember the dream
I've been
well
down
enough
that
to
road
put it
too. Like,
together.
I done wrote down some notes, and I'm like, yeah, where was my mind at when I wrote this down?
I
Yeah.
don't remember smoking something, but
Yeah. But Janice, I definitely appreciate you being on the show, taking time
it
out
was a
to talk
pleasure.
about your two incredible books. Just
Thank
real quick
you.
for the viewers, is there a way for them to contact you? How are they
Yes.
able to get your books?
Yes, please. My website is janiceberliner.com. Couldn't be simpler. And there you will find blog posts that I've written, summaries of the books, little bios of some of the characters. Uh, there's certainly a link to order the books. I'm trying to think,
Mhm.
what else is there? Information about me. Um, it's fun. I think it's,
Okay.
kind of fun to wander around somebody's website and explore a little bit. And there is a little promo coming soon kind of thing about book 3. I don't have a date because I haven't finished writing it yet.
Okay.
But I'm
Understandable.
really hoping sometime in 2025. That is my goal.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
definitely for you guys out there, check out the website. Please do yourself a favor and order these books. You're not going to be disappointed. These were an extremely great read. I couldn't put them down. I think I read both of these books within a week and a half. I definitely couldn't put them down because
What?
they were just really interesting. And I haven't really read anything pertaining to this where it's really in depth from a medical field, but
Mm,
then you bring like the family aspect into it as well, and everything just kind of mesh really well together. The dialogue is really great. There's a
thank
lot of
you.
different elements on there that I think you viewers out there can resonate with and possibly apply it to your life and how you interact with your family and how you deal with different situations that come up, especially in the medical field. It's very enlightening in there. And the great thing about Janice is that even if you don't have a medical background, she writes it in a way where it's easy for you to comprehend. So don't get overwhelmed when she starts getting technical in the book, because she definitely does. But she writes it in such an eloquent way that allows you to kind of take everything in, and you don't have to go running off to the encyclopedia over here and try to figure out what it is she's talking about. She writes it in such a way that it's very it's fused with clarity, and it's not going to be so much over your head. So
I
that's
love
definitely what I appreciate. Janice, I wish all the blessings in the world and all the happiness, all the glory to you. You
it.
deserve it. You are
Thank
an
you.
astonishing author. I wish nothing for the best for you. And
Thank you. You're
can't wait for the
so
next book to come out. Please let me know. Matter
I
of fact,
will.
let me know when you write the last word to the book.
We
Let me
have
know when that happens
teasers.
so we can set up the date, bring you back on the show. And definitely, I want a copy, an autograph copy, my
Oh, you are
personal
welcome to
copy.
it.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. So,
I thank you
yeah,
for having me, for your lovely, lovely words. I very much appreciate them. I wish nothing but the best for you as well. And we will be back in touch for sure.
awesome. So, for you guys out there, this was the great, inspiring Janice Berliner blessing us on this show of A Word with the World. I'm so glad for you guys to tune in. I hope you jot down some notes. I hope you just take in everything that she says. She just blooms with positivity here. It was a great interview. And again, you know who it is. It's those Screws of Olympian Multimedia presenting you with another episode of A Word with the World. And the only thing left to say is we'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in.